thanks to the organizer for the kind invitation. So I will present a joint work with Charles Bordenave and Laurent Massoulier. So Charles Bordenave is working in Toulouse, and Laurent Massoulier is a colleague of mine at INRIA in Paris. I will start this talk with a few reminders on basic graph theory on Ramanujan graphs, and start with standard adjacency matrix and then define the non-backtracking one. So just a fixed notation, I consider non-oriented graphs. So edges are a priori non-oriented. And the standard adjacency matrix is denoted by A. It's a symmetric matrix where you put a 1 each time you have an edge between any two vertices U and V. So I will assume that the number of vertices is always a little n. And since the matrix is symmetric, you have a real eigenvalue, which I denote mu1, mu2, mu_n. So I'm not using the standard notation with lambda because I will keep the lambda for the non-backtracking eigenvector. And if you have, if G is connected, you have the standard Perron-Frobenius theorem, which tells you that mu1 is strictly greater than all the remaining eigenvalue, and there is one special case when G is bipartite, where mu1 is strictly equal to minus the smallest eigenvalue. Okay, so this is all basic spectral graph theory. And if you consider regular graphs, the regular graphs are graphs for which each node has a degree d, then clearly the largest eigenvalue mu1 is just d, and the associated eigenvector is a constant eigenvector. And then people looked at what we call the spectral gap. So here is the definition of the spectral gap. You look at all the non-trivial eigenvalue, so all which are different from D, and you look at the maximal absolute value of them. Okay? And there is a well-known theorem due to Alon and Bopanna, which tells you that this mu has to be at most 2 square root of D minus 1, plus something which goes to 0 when n tends to infinity.
At least?
Yes. What did I say?
At most.
Okay, at least, sorry. 2 square root. So this is because I'm seeing the next slide. The Ramanujan graphs are those graphs for which mu is at most 2 square root of D minus 1. Now. So you have the eigenvalue D, and the second one is around 2 square root, has to be bigger than 2 square root D minus 1, and for Ramanujan graphs, the gap between these two eigenvalues is maximum. This is what it tells you. It turns out that the existence of such graphs is rather hard to prove, and there is a very recent work where they were able to construct the regular Ramanujan bipartite graph for any value of D, but before that it was only known for some very specific value of D. Okay. So why people care about this spectral gap? You have a lot of things that you can compute from them. So the first bond was derived by Chung on the diameter of the graph. The diameter is the maximal distance between any two vertices in the graph as a function of the number of nodes, the degree, and the spectral gap. Okay, so you have a quantity like this. And perhaps more importantly, you know that Ramanujan graphs are good expander, and here are all the definition you need if you don't know the name expander. So the isoperimetric constant is given by this, so where this number is basically the size of the cut, so it's related to the talk of Amir, for example. You are computing the number of edges which cross the partition given by X on the complementary part of X. X is a subset of vertices. And you have this Chigars inequality which relates this isoperimetric constant with the spectral gap. Okay? So in particular, if the spectral gap is big, you have a large Chigars inequality, so you have a good expansion property for your graph. These are some of the reasons why people care about Ramanujan graphs. There is another highly non-trivial result due to Friedman, which tells you that also it's very hard to construct deterministically Ramanujan graphs. It turns out that if you take a graph uniformly at random among all the irregular graphs, then you have a good chance to find a Ramanujan graphs. So here is a more precise statement of what I just said. So if you look at the second largest eigenvalue of a uniform random graph, it's almost what you want for a Ramanujan graph plus a small term of error, which tends to infinity when the size of the graph tends to infinity. So although it's very hard to construct explicitly, doing it at random leads you to it's nearly Ramanujan because here you have a small correction term. So what people looked also at is a problem tried. So all what I said were definitions valid only for the irregular graphs. It turns out that it's not completely straightforward to extend this notion of Ramanujan graph to non-regular graphs. So there are some attempts by Lubowski and Uri. And one of the reasons is if you take the straight extension of, in terms of the spectral property of the adjacency matrix, it doesn't work. So typically, if because the high degree nodes will create spurious eigenvalues with eigenvector localized on this small pattern, and this eigenvector do not tell you anything about the global structure of the graph. Okay. So if you are too naive, you will fail. And there is another approach, which I will present now. And it's related to the so-called non-backtracking matrix. So we call it Hashimoto's non-backtracking matrix because I think Hashimoto is the first one who introduced it. So also we started, so the graph is non-oriented. You associate to each edge two edges which are oriented, one in one direction and the other in the opposite direction. Okay, so the number of oriented edges is twice the number of non-oriented edges. And then you construct the following matrix, where the indices are in this set, so a set of oriented edges. And it's a 0-1 matrix where you put a 1 when you see this pattern. Okay, so when the oriented edge F is following the edge E and is not non-backtracking, so meaning that this, the value of this vertex is not the same as this one. So it gives you E by 2m, m by m matrix where m is twice the number of non-oriented edges. Okay, is the definition clear? Now, this is a non-symmetric matrix, but still you can apply Perron-Frobenius theorem. And you know that if it's irreducible, then the largest eigenvalue is real, and all the other one, they might be complex, but with modulus less than lambda 1. So if you try to say a little bit more about this Perron eigenvalue, lambda 1, what you do is a basic kind of power iteration method. So you take the L exponent of B, and you apply it to the vector with only 1, 1, at the entry E and zeros otherwise. And the norm of this vector, the L1 norm of this, is just the number of non-backtracking paths starting from the edge E of length L plus 1. Okay? And if G is too connected, then the matrix B is irreducible, and you can show that actually lambda 1, so the Perron eigenvalue, is the growth rate of the universal cover of the graph G. So the universal cover, if you don't know it, it's like a little bit like the computational tree of the graph. Okay. So this is completely general, and it has nothing to do with random graphs. And here is something else which has nothing to do with random graphs, and it's a purely algebraic equality, which is actually not very hard to verify. It's so-called Yarabas identity. So if you look at this determinant, so it's z times the identity minus b, so it's a characteristic polynomial of b. You have this relation where the matrix Q is a diagonal matrix where you put zeros everywhere except on the diagonal where on the vth entry you have the degree of v minus 1. Okay? And A again is the adjacency matrix. So you see that the zeros of this polynomial correspond to the eigenvalue of b, and you have here a quadratic expression in z. Okay. So if you take the particular case of a D regular graph, then of course Q is very simple. It's just D minus 1 times the identity. And you have a one-to-one mapping between the eigenvalue of B and the eigenvalue of A. So the spectrum of B is given by, so you have the plus and minus 1 due to this term. And then each time you have an eigenvalue mu for the adjacency matrix A, you solve this quadratic equation in lambda and it gives you an eigenvalue for B. So you see that since it's a quadratic equation, you will obtain possibly complex numbers. Okay. So this has been used by already, and this is a well-known fact. And now you can reinterpret all the results, as you say, for D regular graphs, not in terms of the spectrum of A, but in terms of the spectrum of B. And here are the translation with this. So now I'm considering the eigenvalue of B, so the lambdas, whereas the mu's were the eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix. So first, the largest eigenvalue is D minus 1, because when you take the universal cover of a D regular tree, it's a branching process of, with offspring D minus 1. Okay, so it's not D. Then the corresponding Allen-Bopanna bounds translate in this relation in the real part of the eigenvalue of B. Being Ramanujan, when you are a non-bipartite, means that actually the radius of the modulus of lambda 2 is exactly square root of lambda 1. Okay. And Friedman's theorem tells you that if you take a random uniform D regular graph, then you have this relation, so all the eigenvalues are in this disk. And indeed, they are exactly on the disk. So the Allen-Bopanna bounds correspond to now this spectral gap, and all the other eigenvalues are now possibly complex and on this circle. Okay. So this leads to one way to generalize this notion of Ramanujan, so this connection, to general non-regular graphs, and this was proposed in the work of Stark and Terrace. It's written here. So the condition that if you look at the eigenvalues of the non-backtracking operator, if so lambda 1 is the parent Frobenius 1, it's the real positive eigenvalue. If all the others have modulus less or equal than the square root of the larger than 1, then you might say that this is your graph has a Ramanujan property. So what I just say is that for the regular graph, it's exactly the same. We hope that with this definition, you can extend also the other results that are available for D regular graphs to non-D regular graphs. Unfortunately, we don't know any result like Allen-Bopanna lower bound, Chigger types isoperimetric inequality, or Chung types diameter inequality based on the spectrum of B. Okay, so in our paper we have only very weak a bound in terms of the singular value of B to the key. So also in the world of D regular Ramanujan graphs, these properties are relatively easy to show. I mean, the proofs are tricky, but not too long. The hard part is Friedman's theorem, and what we did with this definition is we did prove the Friedman's theorem, but we are not able to prove this result. This is a high-level view of our work. So here is just one slide for physicists. Florent, you have to listen. So I will define, and this notation will be important. So the check here. So Lenka, you have to listen also. X check is when you reverse edge here are oriented, and E minus 1 is when you take the opposite direction for each edge. So it's just this operation is just a permutation of the indices of the vector, right? You are reverting the X. So I denote it, well, it's a linear operator, and it's an evolution, it's clear when you reverse twice. And it's fairly easy to show that you have this relation, and actually it's this relation also when you take B to the K, which means that BK times P is symmetric. So it's a symmetric matrix. And apparently in physics it's called it's called a PT invariance, but I don't know what it means. Except this. It turned out to be useful, I mean, for us, because when you do, so this is now a symmetric matrix. When you do the spectral decomposition of this matrix, you get some very, I would say, analogs, weak analogs of Allen-Bopana, Chung, and Shiger types inequality. Okay. So I think there is much work to do in this direction, and now I will present what we were able to achieve, which is more related to the Friedman theorem. So all what I said so far was true for any graphs, and now I will look at random graphs. And I mean, so of course there is nothing to prove for the irregular graphs since Friedman did all the work. And the natural first graph to look at are the standard Erdős-Rényi random graph. So I'm taking a graph on n vertices. In the sparse regime, so the average degree is alpha, and I will let n tends to infinity. And here is a result of a simulation of a small graph. So you see that there is one eigenvalue for which is seems to be exactly equals to the average degree, and everything else seems to be in a disk of radius square root of 4, which is 2. And this is exactly what we proved. So if you look at the non-backtracking matrix of the Erdős-Rényi random graph, the largest eigenvalue lambda 1 is of order alpha, and all the remaining one have a modulus which is strictly less than square root of alpha, with high probability, okay, when n tends to infinity. So I will show you a few technical slides now, and then I will come back to the community detection problem. So the main idea is to work on, to do a kind of power iteration method. So to take the Lth moment of B, and you need to take L sufficiently big, so L will scale with n as a logarithm at a logarithmic speed in n, but you don't want to reach the diameter of the graph, so kappa is less than 1/2 always. Okay. So you are going quite far in the when you are taking the Lth power of B, you are exploring your graph at depth L, but you stop before reaching the diameter of the graph, way before. So you don't want to see too many cycles, basically.
Actually, you see 3 there, right?
No, not really. So I come back.
Golden cyclic graph.
Yes. So I will come. I will come back to that actually. So you have the standard coupling between, if L is fixed, this is the standard coupling with Galton-Watson tree with Poisson offspring with mean alpha. And what we do is to look at the singular value decomposition of this. And here is the main argument, technical argument of the proof. The point is to try to decompose BL in the sum of these two terms, where basically the signal is here, so S will correspond to something which is related to the largest eigenvalue, and the remaining term here should be small. So if you are able to show a decomposition like this, where the norm of C is small, and these two vectors are not orthogonal, then you can apply a kind of Bauer-Fick theorem telling you that actually S will give you information on the largest eigenvalue of B. And if the remaining term is small, then all the remaining eigenvalue will have a modulus which scale with the norm of this the remaining term. Okay. So all what we need to do is to find actually these two vectors, but it turns out that there is only one vector to find. And once you are giving me this psi, I will define this other vector in this way, so that the remaining term is something like that. So I'm looking at the supremum of BL times x for all x which are orthogonal to this psi vector. Okay. So this is a kind of natural to what you do if you do. If B is a symmetric matrix, this corresponds to looking at the orthogonal to the eigenvector. Okay. So there is only one vector to find, this psi, and then taking this data and showing that the norm of this remaining term is small. So how to find this psi? you are taking L's power of B. So what does it mean? So again, you have an interpretation in terms of the graph. So this term where key is a vector with ones everywhere is just counting the number of non-backtracking paths of a given length starting at the edge U. Okay. So if L is of the order I told you, this is roughly the population of Galton-Watson branching process with a Poisson number of children. So you have a standard result telling you that it grows exponentially fast at a rate which is alpha to the L. Okay. And in particular, if you have no extinction, if you go L step further, you have this kind of result. So this tells you that you might hope that this vector, which is exactly BL times key, should be close to an eigenvector of BL associated to alpha L, thanks to this relation. So this is what we tried first, and it turned out that if you are taking this vector phi for this psi, then you need to show something like that, and we were not able to do it. Okay, so we were not able to perform it, and it turned out that there is a very small trick here, that it's not the right psi that you need to take. You need to take its image with the PT transformation. Okay, so you need to reverse edges. So which is kind of intuitive, because when you are always multiplying by the left, you will have only information on eigenvector on the right and not on the left. So you need to do both multiplication. So anyway, in the end, if you do that, so you end up with this zeta. So this is the formula I gave you before, and this is the decomposition of BL. So something plus the remaining term. So and now what you need to prove is, if you want to prove that lambda 1 is of order alpha, is that this S is of order alpha to the L. Okay, that these two vectors they are not orthogonal. And if you want to prove that lambda 2, the modulus is less than square root of alpha, you need to prove that the remaining term here, which is this term, is at most of order alpha times to the power L divided by 2. And the L divided by 2, the 2 here is exactly the same as the square root here. Okay. So if you are able to prove this two property, you apply Bauer-Fix theorem, and you will get basically our result. So the first property is done by coupling the exploration process with standard Poisson-Galton-Watson tree. So the tricky part is you need to handle an expression like this. So what it means graphically is you are going at depth 2L in your tree, then you backtrack once, and you are going at depth L in the opposite direction. So it's a little bit weird, but I mean you can manage to show the convergence of such a limit, because on branching processes you can compute everything. The other part which bonds the remaining the term, so the important things here to know to see is that here it's alpha to the power L divided by 2. So here there is a problem, because the L is big, so you start to see cycle, and indeed if you try to apply a brute force method of moments, it will fail, because you will have a small, for example, it's very easy to see that if you have a small click, it will contribute a lot to the expectation. So this is the computation done here. The way to do it is a kind of standard. So it's not due to, I mean, I think it's already present in the proof of Friedman, and it was perhaps done even before, I don't know. So we define what we call tangle free, which is, I think, what you were mentioning. So that no vertex has more than 2 distinct cycles in the neighborhood of size n. So again, this is a kind of standard, and this is used in Friedman's work or in the work of Niemann, Moser, and Sly. So now you replace the else power of B by I would say pseudo power of B, where you count only tangle-free paths, okay, instead of all the paths. And then you can show that everything will work fine. Well, it requires quite a bit of work. The main idea is try to get to apply the method of moment. You need to center this random variable. So this is what we do here. And then you have a very tricky decomposition, which was actually found in Laurent Massoulet's work that appeared at Stock. And we are using exactly the same decomposition to bond this term in a sum of different terms. And you see, well, I mean, this is not very important, but you see that you have two types of terms that appear that you need to control. So, for example, this term corresponds to the centered random variable, and you apply the standard method of moments for this. You can show that it's upper bounded by alpha to the t divided by 2, and the other one you will use again the coupling with the Galton-Watson tree, and the important thing is again that you can upper bound it with a power of alpha which scale like t divided by 2. So when you put everything together here, you will obtain a term which are no more than alpha to the L divided by 2. Okay, and this is what really matters. Okay, so that's it for the technical part. And one of the motivations for us to study this non-backtracking matrix was this paper by people from the audience. So, so they applied the spectral method of the non-backtracking matrix, exactly the one I show you, on a real data set. So here is the infamous Karate Club's data set. And so what they did is you take the largest, the Perron eigenvalue, and this disk is just, you take the square root of the value of this and you plot this disk. So you do not need to have any parameter or anything. And everything that falls out of this disk is interpreted as a kind of signal, and then you can do community detection based on the eigenvector associated to this eigenvalue. So this was their claim, and we basically tried to prove something like that for the stochastic block model. So in a rather generic form. So here I have R community, if you want, and the size of each community is of community I is roughly pi. So gamma should be strictly less than 1. Okay. So you can take a random instance if you want. And now you will connect two nodes, one in community I and the other one in community G, with this probability given by Wij divided by n. So Wij is not scaling with n. It's symmetric in I and G. So you see that we are looking at the sparse regime, where n will tend to infinity, so the number of connections, the average degree in the graph will be bounded. So this is also called a special type of inhomogeneous random graphs. So now if you look at one individual of a particular type G, what is the mean number of type I neighbor is given by this expression. You look at what we call the mean progeny matrix, which is this zodiac P is just a matrix with 0 everywhere except on the diagonal, where you on the ith term you put pi. So this gives you this kind of term. Now what we assume for our proof to work is that the average degree in the graph is constant. So it's completely homogeneous. So this is, if you fix G, this is the average degree in the community G, and you assume that the average degree does not depend on the community. So it's the same all over the graph, and let's denote it alpha. Then alpha is actually the largest eigenvalue of M, and you have other, I mean, this is not symmetric, but the eigenvalue is, it's easy to show that they are real. And you order them like this. And now you want to connect this eigenvalue mu1, mu2 to the eigenvalue of the non-backtracking random graph obtained from this stochastic block model. And, so one particular case that was discussed a lot already in this workshop is the case where you have two communities and symmetric communities. Then W is typically, you have only two parameters because you impose that the degree is the same over the whole graph. So you have the probability to get a connection inside your community and the probability to get a connection with somebody outside the community, A and B. So then mu1, it's simply the average degree, and the second eigenvalue of phi type W is A minus B divided by 2. And here is a plot of simulation again of exactly this symmetric stochastic block model with two community, average degree 3, and this parameter equals to this quantity. And you see that you have two eigenvalue out of the bulk, which is contained in a radius, which seems to be of radius square root of 3 in this case. And this is exactly what we showed. So if you order the eigenvalue of the progeny matrix in this way, and so the critical value is square root of mu1, where in our case mu1 is just the average degree. So you look at all the eigenvalues that are bigger than the square root of the average degree. This will show up in the spectrum of B, so this will pop up of the disk, and everything else will be contained in a disk of reduced square root of alpha. Okay. Is this result clear? And so, I mean, this is one part of, this is not sufficient to do community detection. Here you can, but it's already sufficient if you want to count, for example, the number of communities. If you want to do a community, what people call reconstruction of the community, you need to look at the eigenvector associated to this lambda k. And so I will not be very precise, but we also have a description of the eigenvector associated to the eigenvalue which are not in the bulk. And in particular, if the mu k are distinct, then you can show that they are asymptotically orthogonal. Okay, which is a nice property. So again, if I'm going back to the most basic stochastic block model with two symmetric community, the condition is exactly the condition that we already show in this conference. So as soon as you are above this threshold, then with high probability you will do strictly better than a random guess just by a spectral method based on the second largest eigenvector of the non-backtracking operator. It was known before by the work of Niemal, Mossel and Sly that if you are below this transition, then you cannot do better than a random guess. You can also apply result to the non-symmetric case. So when P is different from 1/2, it's a bit different from what we just saw. So here, since I'm imposing that the average, the degree is the same in each community, I have this constraint. Okay, alpha, the mean degree in my graph, is the same in community 1 and in community 2. So I need to introduce a new parameter C. And now the so-called Kesten-Stigam bond is written in this way. So if this parameter is larger than 1, then with high probability you can reconstruct something which is positively correlated with the true partition. It turns out that you do not have this result, and for good reason, because it's not true anymore. So actually, Niemann and I think Chris mentioned it yesterday. This I don't know if it's published. I found it on archives. This paper of Niemann and Netrapalli, where they show that for if P is sufficiently small, even below the Kesten-Stigam bonds, if you do exhaustive search, which is not a polynomial time algorithm, you can find the community. Okay, so you can do strictly better than random guess. So what we did with Francesco Caltagirone is a computation which is apparently very similar to what Florent showed us yesterday. So we look at a bit simpler case where the average degree alpha tends to infinity while the size of the community are fixed. on the signal to noise ratio, so this ratio is fixed also. Okay. So it's a denser graph, but you are close to the phase transition. You remain close to the phase transition. Oh, yeah. So the Kestenstigon bond is exactly what it's when this ratio is bigger than when the what you call signal to noise ratio is bigger than 1. So this corresponds to this curve. When you're above it, then the spectral metal will work. And what Nimal and Pratali show is that you can find points here where exhaustive search is doing better than random guess. So this is where we believe it's hard, but I mean we don't know how to prove it. And then there is information theoretic bond. So apparently Florent computed it rigorously. So you can say that it's impossible to find something which is positively correlated with the true partition below these red curves. So in this regime where, I mean, what is known rigorously so far, I think in this picture, in this regime when alpha is tending to infinity, indeed you do not even need to apply the non-backtracking matrix, you just can look at the spectral method applied to the adjacency matrix and it will work fine. I mean, this is also this is closely related to the Beck-Benahous-Péchet phase transition. So we did it rigorously with Florent Benazzi-Georges and Laurent Macouillet. So, yeah.
So the adjacency matrix works because you're working in the dense limit.
Exactly. So okay, here I'm a bit fuzzy. You need actually a lower bound on alpha for the proof, at least for the proof to work here. So namely, you need a degree which scale like a power of log n, because you need to control the norm of the matrix. And I mean, so but under this technical assumption, you can go all the way to the Kestenstigon bond just with the standard spectral method. And using the heuristic of the cavity method, what I mean was described a few times already in this workshop. So we compute this red curve, and in particular we compute the threshold p. So you see that on this range of parameter p, you have no hard phase, whereas below this you have a hard phase which starts, and you even can compute explicitly the value of this p star. So this is what we are doing with Francesco Caltagirone and a student Leo Miola. So I will just mention briefly a few other extensions that are working with non-backtracking operator. So when you consider what we call the labeled stochastic block model, where you have also information on the label that you put on the edges, not only on the graph structure, you are able to do things. So here it's a picture of joint work with Al-Assad, Florent, Lenka, where the label on the edge is typically a color. So you are more likely to have a blue edge if you are inside the community, and a red edge if you have an edge between two different communities. So it corresponds actually to what people also call the censored block model. And you can encode this information into the non-backtracking matrix in an optimal way. And this is a plot of you have also a phase transition in this case, where everything is working fine. So in terms of proofs, we have some partial results when the labels are relatively simple, like plus or minus 1 or 2 colors. And it's a bit more tricky when you have more colors. We also work on the so-called degree-corrected stochastic block model. This is a model where you are adding noise into the model by it's basically the same, but you are putting a weight on each vertex corresponding to the average degree you want him to have. So we have a positive and negative result for this model. So the negative result corresponds to the case that below the phase transition you will not be able to do better than random guess, and we are working on extending the non-backtracking matrix to this. It's a bit, perhaps a bit surprising, but actually you do not need to change at all the matrix in order for the spectral method to work. So you don't need to know, for example, the parameter for the weight on the vertices. It's exactly the same non-backtracking matrix that we are using, and it seems to work pretty well. You can also handle small clicks in the graph. So if you are adding, if instead of, well, what we did with Francisco Katajan is instead of the standard Erdos-Renyi graph, you look at the hypergraphs. So instead of putting edges of size 2, you are putting, for example, triangles. And the way you put triangles depends on the community you belong to. So you have another version of the stochastic block model. So in this case, you can apply the same kind of non-backtracking matrix, but you have to be a little bit careful because now you have to forbid not only the non-backtracking path, but also you have to take into account the click structure in the graph. Okay, but everything seems to work pretty well. And so this is a problem that I think is open. So we are not able to show anything in this case. This is a very simple stochastic block model, but you have no noise. So meaning that you have only two graphs, but the two graphs overlap. Okay. So you have two communities. You have no connection if you belong to different communities, but there are some people who belong to both communities. And so you have a parameter which is the size of the overlap, and only one other parameter which is the average number of friends you have in the community. Okay, and of course now you have a graph which is not homogeneous in terms of degree, because people in the overlap have a higher degree. And it's very easy to find them. So if you want to do strictly better than random guess, it's very easy just to concentrate on these guys, and then you will do better than random guess. So the interesting question is, can you do something for people which do not belong to the overlap? And it turns out that because of this heterogeneity in degree, we are not able to, our proof breaks down, and we are not able to say anything. Also, it looks like the same kind of phase transition is appearing, where you see that everything is in a disk of radius, which is, you need to do the math in this case, but it seems to work pretty well based on the overlapping matrix. Also, we are not able to show anything in this particular case. And I think that's it.
Questions?
For the overlapping, can't you just take them out?
Yes, the overlap, you take the overlap and then you, it's not possible because actually the high degree node will induce a noise. And this noise, it's not completely, here we are very close to the boundary.
Exactly. You just know them approximately. You don't know exactly.
The degree distribution will overlap.
Because you have a mixture of degrees, okay? So you cannot. I will not be able to know all the people which are in the overlap exactly. So there will always remain some, and this will induce some noise. And we tried, and this seems to not to work. Perhaps there is some easy, clever way to do it.
Any other questions? So, one thing you didn't mention is that the non-backtracking matrix is essentially the Jacobian of belief propagation.
Yeah, because we had a lot of belief propagation, so I didn't want to.
This was our original motivation for looking at.
Yes.
Related to the BTS.
There are many connections that I didn't spoke about because I know that physicists, you guys know it. So I try to emphasize a little bit. Actually, the earlier work on the Hashimoto non-backtracking work, which is a connection with the Ramanujan graphs. And because I think there are also some mathematical challenges here that are interesting. So I try to. I didn't take the usual way to present the non-backtracking matrix. I try to. Otherwise, you will never be surprised. So.
All right. Any other questions? All right, let's thank the speaker.